All right, so this is the Oaklawn Park recap. I'm going to recap both Sunday and yesterday's stakes action today. I know it's a little bit later. I'm trying to experiment with some times, but we'll recap these days. Let's start off on Sunday, and it's going to be pretty short because there's just not a whole lot to talk about. Pretty even run races, nothing really standing out or to bring up. And sometimes that happens. I get a lot like, just tell me the troubled trips, give me the big BTL races. And a lot of the times with doing trip notes, there's not those kind of big flashy trips. A lot of it's form cycle, a lot of it's subtle, a lot of it's finding a horse that just needs something a little bit different, whether it's a post or a distance or a jockey change or equipment, those things that are a little bit more subtle. So with that said, yeah, nothing real flashy on Sunday to talk about. And I guess that kind of makes it easy because there's a lot to get through on Sunday. 10 races on the day, but we'll kind of focus on the graded stakes, the 3 graded stakes. And then again, if there's any questions on any of the other races that I didn't cover, send a note. But let's start with the Bayakoa stakes. And this is a race that I wrote up on Brisnet. A race that I thought, while logical and while she did run a really good race, that the number 6, Whoa Nelly, could be a little bit vulnerable in that spot. And that was just sort of based on her running style and based on, mess around with this a little bit, based on her running style and then also, moving up in class. She was coming out of the Pippin, which has turned out to be a pretty productive race overall. But, again, that running style, and you've got a horse at a short price, you've talked about in the videos, and just kind of an overall handicapping aspect, especially in a race where there were a couple other horses in here, including the winner, Go Google Yourself, that made sense and fit in this spot. And so we'll kind of start with that. I mean, Whoa Nelly, she ran a good race. The ride, not quite ideal, but given her running style, given the outside post, kind of the race shape, it's kind of hard to fault what Rocco did. He moved early, he moved wide, but really there wasn't much to knock. I grade these races and grades, optics grades, as kind of like an overall performance. Both Whoa Nelly and the winner, Go Google Yourself, both earning Bs. And so Go Google Yourself, unlike the trip with Whoa Nelly, she was able to just get an excellent trip, an excellent ride under Brian Hernandez Jr., rated in the pocket, waited for her time, moved into the clear, and just, had that tiring horse late to run down. But, take nothing away from her. Those two asserted themselves as kind of no excuse. I mean, it's just not quite on the level of those two fillies. A disappointing effort from Gold Standard. There was some traffic. She raced inside, maybe not quite the trip that she wants. Maybe she wants to be more forwardly placed. But, the horse, when they're at this kind of graded stakes level and they need to show some class, it's hard to, say, well, you just didn't get a perfect trip. Like, that's the way it goes. She's run from off the pace in the past. Just for whatever reason, this maybe wasn't her day, it wasn't her distance, coming back off the layoff. But, nothing real excuse worthy there. Number 4, Motion of Motion. I don't know. She ran well over this track last season, and just doesn't seem like she's really moved forward as a 4-year-old, or really even as a 3-year-old. Her numbers have kind of been the same. Her trip, not terrible, not ideal. I mean, she was fractious in the gate, which kind of made her hop out of the gate and get off a little bit slow, but quickly got into a good trip and just just wasn't on this level. So I'm not sure what Balto's going to do with her. Probably regroup, find a spot that probably makes a little bit more sense with that. There's actually a comment. When will you give the selections with the circles and the squares? I'm not really sure what you mean by the selections with the circles and the squares. I'm writing up a race of the day on Brisnet, and I'm trying to pick races that obviously using optics. That's what I use. That's how I handicap. I'm trusting the data there. Races that produce opportunities. So follow along on there, as well as optics EQ, and kind of go over the plots. But that's sort of the selections with the circles and squares. If you want to re-clarify, I'll try to give a better answer if I didn't answer it. So I'm sorry. Getting back to this race, we've got Lady Subi. She was a pace setter. Again, in the analysis, distance-wise, she's not a two-turn type. She runs a race, she does her best, but she's not a two-turn type. They're gonna have to find another spot for her. Maybe, she can kind of sneak away if the race is soft enough, but overall just not quite there. So we'll kind of see where these horses come out of this race. I wouldn't necessarily it could be a key race. It just kind of depends on where these horses show up. Moving up in the graded stakes company, we're going to have to see top two finishers, obviously, kind of the two to follow on that front. We'll move ahead to race 8. So this is the Razorback Stakes for older horses. A lot of these horses coming out of the split division 5th season earlier this meet. And again, you can go back. That was on January 25th. So if you want to go back and kind of watch the recap of those races, we go through a little bit more horse by horse. But focusing on the Razorback here, the number 5, Pioneer Spirit. He overall was a pretty I'm sorry, Warrior's Charge. I'm on the wrong thing here. that looked a little funky. I was looking at the running line for the 5th season. So Pioneer Spirit was one of the winners of the split division 5th season. But the winner of this race, Warrior's Charge, able to make a lone trip. He showed some grit late, but he was also kind of drifting out late. Overall, it was a pretty favorable trip for him. Others, not so much the case. But his trip, they were assertive on the front end, and then did show his grit late. I mean, Bankit came to him, put in a good challenge, and he dug in. Again, started to drift out late. Had a leading quarter, almost 48 for the half. 112 and change for that 6 furlong. So a pace that he could run on the front end and then still have some kick late. The second place finisher, Bankit, he was able to save ground, angle out late, and just could not get by the winner. A good effort from him, not much to knock, but again, if he's going to step up or he's going to stay on this race. Now he finished 5th, and this is the number 9 Campaign. This is kind of his style. He just doesn't have a lot of early speed, so it's something that you have to factor in. This is a big effort. I mean, he broke slow. He was wide. He was well out of the screen. I mean, he didn't even seem like he was in the race. And a massive kick. I mean, he finishes in kind of the blanket for that 3rd, 4th, 5th spot. Big effort from him, especially coming back off that the race in the marathon, which, it's nice to see him again because it was a little bit concerning. I happened to be on track at Breeders' Cup that day. But yeah, seeing good effort from him. He needs pace to run at, but again, promising, making his first start of the year. We'll kind of see where he goes. The 3rd place finisher, Snapper Sinclair and Pioneer Spirit. So both those horses running in the 5th season. Kind of an even effort here. They just might not be graded stakes types horses. Bravazzo, wide trip, not ideal, not his ideal trip. He just kind of seems at this point where he's going to show up, he's going to run, he can win, but he's going to need the right spot. He's going to need the right trip. He's going to need a lot of things in his favor. He's in form. It's kind of one of those when we're looking at improve, regress, stay the same. He's one of those stay the same types. Raider Superstar, almost similar. He raced inside off the pace, pretty even. Math Wizard, some upside there. Not the most ideal trip. Had traffic early, had to move wide. He showed running spots. I thought that was a good effort coming back off a 107-day layoff. Now as a 4-year-old, so good effort from him. A similar trip, kind of that sneaky subtle trip for Guest Suite. It wasn't going to be a test for him. He was coming off that big effort in the 5th season where he really fit and was coming into that race the right way. And here, again, it's just not a bad effort. It's one of those really kind of subtle trips. But he's maintaining his form. He could certainly factor next time out. Exulting, raced inside and was just never in the race. Now, Jovia, probably, the people that liked him, he went off at 5-1. Disappointing effort from him. I guess if we're looking at, we're looking at him from like a form cycle standpoint. I wasn't a fan of him going into this race, and a lot of that had to do with his races from last year. I'll kind of go over that pretty quick before we get into the Southwest. He had a couple races last year in the Long Branch and the Belmont. Both those races, he was able to take advantage of the profile, so a biased trip, and the same thing even earlier in the year in the Jimmy Winkfield. So he kind of had that form where it's like he's got run, like he's a decent horse, but he's also been a little bit flattered. He had a good trip in his comeback race at Aqueduct, again, that's sprinting. So, perhaps you can make the case, maybe some regression. He had to ship, he had to go 2 turns, things like that. I think there's more upside with him. I just don't think that necessarily yesterday was the day to play him, and that seemed to be the case. But, we'll kind of see where he ends up going forward. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers it on that race. The one everyone's excited about because we're following these 3-year-old horses, the Southwest Stakes. So this race, again, this is a race I wrote up on Brisnet. I wrote up on Optics, even though I spelled one of the horses' names wrong. It's amazing to do all the handicapping work and then miss the part that they actually spell out for you. So depending on where you saw it, it's answer in, not answer it. But this race, there was kind of, the way that I saw it, there was pretty much 2 contenders, Answer In and Silver Prospector. Both those horses looked like they were the 2 horses to beat in this race, and one of them ended up getting it done, and that's the number 2, Silver Prospector. Very favorable trip, much better than in the Smarty Jones earlier this meet. Where he just did not have a good trip and still showed a lot of run. Again, you can go back and watch that recap because I did talk about his trip. That was on opening day in the mud in the Smarty Jones. Not getting a good trip, rated off the pace, was against the flow. And ran on late. So it was the type of trip that he had a lot of upside out of, and got the right trip. Now, being yesterday was kind of the day for him. He's a little suspect going forward, in my opinion. Again, the trip being favorable, that's one factor, but distance-wise, it can be a little concerning. He wasn't giving quite the visuals you'd want to see, starting to flash that tail, look like he's getting tired late, and actually drifting out too. If you watch the head-on, you can really see that he's starting to drift out. So that's just something to keep in mind as he goes forward, because obviously with these horses, they're going to be looking at more ground and tougher company as it goes. But so he was able to get the trip. Wells Bayou made an easy lead. I mean, that kind of goes to Gold Street, so we'll sort of talk of them as kind of a, I don't know, paired couple, because they both had the ability to show early speed. The rider on Gold Street decided to not take the lead. I don't know WTF what he was thinking, but was not assertive, took back and pretty much took this horse out of his race and took away his major asset, which allowed Wells Bayou to get kind of a comfortable trip on the front end. Again, reasonable fractions. He was able to hold on there. So again, we'll kind of see where, where he ends up. Overall as a horse, you kind of like him because he's showing up every time and he's running races and maintaining his form on that front. Cancel this out. Answer In. So Answer In was the other horse. He had run really well in all 3 starts, ran a good race in the Springboard Mile, finishing in that tight photo. And even though he had that, I was a little bit suspect in this race, even though I thought he figured, because of the poor effort of Shoplifted in the Smarty Jones, but nonetheless, Answer In. I thought he ran a good race, all things considered. I mean, he's making his first start back in 64 days, so in 2 months, and not ideal. He got forced out, pushed wide in the first turn, and kind of wide tracking trip. He lost his line in the lane. I don't know if he kind of got spooked, whether it was the footing, but he flipped his leads, he kind of lugged in. The rider was able to correct, so it's not like Silver Prospector, who was legitimately driven given the trip. Shoplifted, I mean, he hasn't progressed. That was after the Smarty Jones. It was like, I've seen enough. I made excuses for the Santa Anita races. He didn't like the track, whatever. He's just kind of slow at this point to stay on this division. So, I don't know what they end up doing with him. Maybe they try sprinting turf, we'll see. But as far as being a player on this division, he just hasn't shown up. Tayshin, if I'm saying that wrong, I apologize. Also, very wide trip. Forced out on that first turn, and then he was forced out even wider. Again, go back and watch the head-on. You can see how far out he is. And had some trouble there. All things considered, I mean, he's probably got some upside off that trip. I would not discount him. Like to see a little bit more, but overall, I mean, you just under those circumstances, he worked with what he got. Villainous was forwardly placed early, then lost ground. He looks a little bit on the turfy side. Maybe he'll show up on the turf. That would he'd be a little bit interesting on that surface change. American Butterfly, they might go back to one turn with him. Not an ideal trip. I mean, he was pretty washed out. He raced in traffic, so both of those not totally favorable, but just might, distance might be a thing for him. Chase Tracker, slight bobble at the start. He kind of raced behind horses and, just kind of not quite there. He was coming off the maiden win, a favorable maiden win. So we'll kind of see where he goes. I'm sure he's going to kind of go through allowance company, find some confidence there, and then maybe try another graded stakes. At least that would be my assumption. And then again, Gold Street, I still, distance is still a question for him. I mean, he was able to take advantage of the racetrack and the pace scenario. Let me clear this out. We can kind of go through race by race in order to get the win. And I know people in the Smarty Jones, and I know people kind of liked him off that, and he really hadn't done anything wrong to that point. I mean, how do you really fault him? He'd been kind of moving forward. He answered the test that first 2-turn race, winning, but he had those inside lanes. He had the flow in his favor. And then yesterday, trying to rate him off the pace is just that's not going to do this horse any favors, especially at a distance that's not an ideal distance for him. So we'll see. I think there's upside off that. I mean, it's not one of those races that you totally draw a line through, but you can kind of draw a line through under those circumstances. I mean, just looking at his speed figures from this year, he broke his maiden with an 87, ran a 91 in the Sugar Bowl, a 95 in the Smarty Jones. These are, of course, optics figures, and then that 71 yesterday. So can be a little bit forgiving on that. I think that's it. Trying to come into those races. I'm looking over at Daniel's writing some questions. Selections for the Derby. So yeah, we're still a few months away, and we got to see how everything shakes out, see how these horses progress. I think that's the most important part, is you just want to see, not necessarily, we haven't really seen that real breakout, like kind of superstar yet. Maybe it'll come around, but at this point, you just want to see how these horses are developing and moving forward and coming into the race with the right form. But on that front, over at Optics EQ, and this is free. All you have to do is register and log in. We're doing analysis for all the prep races leading up into the Kentucky Derby. And part of our thought with doing that is not just to be like, here's this race and we're going to handicap it for that day and like check out, how we see the race or who we're going to bet or whatever, but to use that information as far as like going into the Derby in order to like another factor to draw from is from those analysis. So Daniel, I'd recommend that. Just log in. Again, it's free. I mean, obviously we'd love you to subscribe. You'll be a better horse player for it, but if not, for whatever reason, just register, log in, it's free, and all that analysis is up there, and that'll help, should help to some extent, for the Derby. And then obviously when Derby comes around, I'm sure you won't be able to not find our picks and write up and selections and videos and whatnot. All right, so that's kind of it for today. We're off. Today's Tuesday, so we'll be back on Thursday over at Oaklawn Park, and then back with the recaps on Friday. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure share. I appreciate it. Comments. I appreciate it. This is the first time with chat today, and it's kind of cool. So I hope more people kind of get involved. And Daniel keeps writing in. That's awesome. All right, you guys. Thank you so much. Enjoy the next couple days, and we'll be back on Friday.